Okay, great. Good morning. My name's Eileen Hartzband. I'm the Pro Bono Director at Legal Services of the Hudson Valley. We'll just do some short introductions, but today we're here, as I'm sure you saw from the program, to talk about how to use the tools that your organization might already have to make pro bono referrals easier for you and tracking of referrals to pro bono partners easier for you. So I do that in my unit at Legal Services of the Hudson Valley. We serve the 7 counties north of New York City, and I'll pass it on to Michael.
My name is Michael Hofrichter. I am at Legal Server. I've been there for almost 5 years. However, I'm going to be relying a lot on my experiences as a former employee of Houston Volunteer Lawyers, which is a volunteer legal program. I was there for 10 years, and served as everything from an intern through an attorney and a staff attorney and director of operations and then executive director. So I've been deeply embedded in that sort of pro bono program aspect, and so we'll talk about that in a bit.
My name is Sarah Anderson. I'm one of the deputy directors for the Pro Bono Unit for Georgia Legal Services. We are one of 2 LSC grantees in Georgia. We cover 154 counties. That's everything except the Metro Atlanta region. And I've been with the Pro Bono Unit for 5 years, and I work on clinics and compliance. So we do a lot of organizing on clinics and trying to figure out how to coordinate clients and pro bono volunteers and staff and try to get it all rolling smoothly.
Hello, my name is Devin Kreitzer. I'm a developer and data analyst at A2J. I'll primarily be focusing on how we were able to integrate Legal Services of Hudson Valley's legal server into a immigration software so they can have easy access to creating new immigration forms relevant to their clients.
Great. So first, I just wanted to get a sense of who's in the room. I'm just going to stand up. Easier for me. So I'm going to have a virtual poll going, but who here provides pro bono services? And by that I mean refers cases to pro bono partners, helps connect your clients to pro bono partners, who organizes pro bono clinics, and whether you do it directly through Legal Server or using the clinic module or SharePoint. So if you can just scan that QR code and answer quickly on your phones, we can get a sense of who's in the room together.
It's so nice to see all the participation. There was a lot of cell phones that went up in the air.
It's fun when you can see it happening in action. Okay, great. So I'm seeing a good number of people in pro bono. So you read the title of the program before you showed up. That's always a good sign. And for those of you who, it looks like a good number of you also, it's not your primary responsibility at your agency, but that's also really helpful to know. Because maybe if it's not your primary responsibility, you're spending a lot of time trying to do your primary responsibility, and you don't necessarily have a lot of time to make these referrals and to follow up on them and to track the data and to get the right documents in the right hands. So this might be even more important for those who don't have all that time to do that and need some quicker ways to do it. Great. I'm clicking through the other questions here. Not sure why I can't do that. Let's see. Sorry, technical difficulties at the tech conference. Let me see if I take it out of PowerPoint. All right, well, I'm not going to be able to figure that out in front of you, but why don't I ask a show of hands instead? How many of you here organize pro bono clinics? Okay, great. This is the old-fashioned way. So now we saw when tech doesn't work, we have to pivot. We're going to try to do that. And that's a good number. I'd say about 50% in this room. Do any of you use Legal Server to do that? Okay, not too many of you. Okay, so we at least have some programming that can show you that today. Do any of you use the clinic module in Legal Server? a few more hands there. And what about SharePoint extranet to provide documents to pro bono attorneys? A couple of you, a few of you. Okay, great. So we'll be able to show you how we use those tools and hopefully show you a little something new today. And let me get us back into PowerPoint mode here. So quickly, I just also want to put you into small groups now so that you have a chance to talk through some of these questions. And then I did have a way for you to submit your responses here, but if it's not working again, then we might just have you raise your hand and tell me what you discussed in your group. So if you can just turn to people into small groups of about 3 people and talk through the questions that are on this slide. I'm not sure why it won't, in like presentation mode, it won't go.
How much time do you want to give for this?
Let's see. I said until about a quarter after we would discuss it, so I'll give them until about 10 after to talk, and then we can like regroup between 10 and quarter after, and then you're the 10 minutes after that.
Yeah.
One more minute. Yeah, I know. I'm surprised they aren't. I wish that my whole thing I put together for to show up on the screen worked. It's because it's in presenter mode. I don't know. Okay. All right, we'll come back together now. Thank you. I'm so glad there's such lively discussion. Thank you so much. All right, so I just want to take a few moments to review what you all discussed. You can't hear? I just want to take a few moments to review what you all discussed. No? This mic isn't working. I will sit here. So, Can you hear me now? Is that better? Get closer? Okay. I'm always told I speak too loudly on the phone, so I didn't think I would need to get so close, but I guess that's only when you have an office next door to me. So I just want to discuss, I did have a pretty word cloud set up, but something about presenter mode isn't working. So why don't you raise your hands and tell me some of the common responses that you got when you discussed in your groups to the first question, which is, what challenges you've faced with sharing documents securely with your pro bono partners? Yes.
We use pro bono attorneys to draft wills and substituted decision-making documents at our clinics, and we are still giving them the information on, pen and paper, because we don't let them use legal server, we don't use the clinic module. So, the challenge there is handing a file off. We have a volunteer attorney at intake, we have some volunteers who draft, we have some volunteers who do execution, and each one of them is going to have to have access to this paper file, which, becomes cumbersome.
That's a real challenge. And are they all meeting clients in person?
The intake attorneys will meet with them in person, they will do the intake, and then the execution attorneys will meet with them when, execute to execute the will when it's drafted. But then if attorneys are volunteering just to draft the wills, then they are probably not going to meet with the client in person because they're just drafting it.
Right, yeah. Okay, so that's a lot of work to get them the documents when you're not even ultimately meeting with them in person.
And some of them are, we will have some attorneys that will take one file all throughout the process, but then there are some who just volunteer for one portion of the process, so, yeah.
Right, but you still have to get it in their hands. That's a lot of work. Anyone else have similar experiences or something else they want to share on that? Yes.
One challenge that my organization has is even when we're comfortable sharing documents, we share documents through OneDrive a lot. Our pro bono partners often have firewalls that don't let them access our documents.
Yep.
And I'm curious, we do not currently share legal server with our volunteers, but I'm curious if that could be a potential solution for that issue.
Terrific. Yep, we will get to that today. So just in the interest of time to move on, any virtual clinics in the room, any difficulties that are different from what we just discussed with scheduling virtual clinics, organizing those? I think there are a lot of the same problems, really, sharing the documents. Clinics tend to be more client-heavy. You have more people preparing for the same time slots, so you need to get even more documents to more people and make sure that it's done securely. Sometimes when clinics are virtual, you also need to, at the same time, make sure the clients can appear virtually and the attorneys can appear virtually. So there's a lot of moving parts there, and we'll talk about that today as well. And then lastly, any solutions anyone wants to share that, in case we don't cover it today? No? Okay, well, hopefully we get to it then. All right, so I'm going to pass it off to Michael. We'll come back to some of these problems that you raised, and I'll talk through solutions that we've come through, but particularly for secure document sharing for pro bono partners. That's going to be up next.
All right. So as I said, my name is Michael. I work at LegalServer now. I've been there about 5 years. Before that, I was at Houston Volunteer Lawyers for almost a decade. Just a quick show of hands in terms of pro bono panels. How many groups here have pro bono panels that are 50 attorneys or smaller? Okay, a few. How many under 100 attorneys? Under 250 attorneys? Under 1,000 attorneys? Right. Houston Volunteer Lawyers is in Houston. Their volunteer panel, when in a typical year, they referred over 1,000 cases to about 700 attorneys, and then had another 500 attorneys who showed up at clinics to give in-person legal advice. Those are pre-pandemic numbers, but that sort of gives you a sense of scale when we're dealing with some of these things, right? And when we did the migration from KEMS to LegalServer, we imported about 15,000 volunteer attorneys into LegalServer. So when you're dealing with numbers that size, right, pro bono is all about relationships, and we talk about how being a good pro bono coordinator means you've got relationships with people at firms and people at organizations, and you know, all right, if I've got a really difficult family law case, I can go call Stuart, and Stuart will say, sure, I will take that case for you. right? It's really nice to have retired family law attorneys who are willing to take on cases. However, that's a personal relationship. And when you're dealing with scope, right, we've got to take a look at data. And that's something where Legal Server gives you lots of options. And so we're going to go through that today. So first, this is a quote that is attributed to Mark Twain. It's probably not from Mark Twain, but I couldn't find it attributed to anyone else. Data is like garbage. You better know what you're going to do with it before you collect it, right? So there's no reason to collect data from volunteers if you're not going to actually use it, right? And Legal Server gives you lots of places to put lots of information about lots of things and people and interests and categories. But if you can't see yourself using it in any way, it's useless, right? And to the extent that you can collect all sorts of things about what a pro bono volunteer's interests are, or what availability they have, or what firm they're working with, if it's not something that you're going to use, it's not going to be helpful down the line, right? And so it's always worth thinking about that with your volunteers, but also with your clients, right? Why have a question on an intake form or an application form or a registration form that doesn't actually serve any purpose in the long run? The other quote that I had here is, with data collection, the sooner the better is always the answer, right? When you're collecting lots of data, sometimes it's better to start early pulling that information in, because if you're dealing with 100 volunteers, 1,000 volunteers, and trying to clean that up, or trying to collect and backfill lots of information, it can be time-consuming and tedious. So a couple of different tools have already been alluded to with Legal Server. One of those is the pro bono a restricted access tool, right, where pro bono volunteers can log into Legal Server and access cases. This is something that probably got a lot better recently with the Office for the Web integration that we rolled out this past fall. The Office for the Web integration means that when you've shared Word documents or Excel files in Legal Server and they're stored on the case record, someone can access and open those and make edits to those documents without having to download them first and then re-upload them afterwards. So that's a huge time saver for sharing documents with pro bono. I know that when I was at HVL, we built out a pro bono restricted access profile that allowed them access to only some of the pro bono some of the documents in Legal Server, right? Documents that were in a folder named pro bono were available to pro bono volunteers, not all documents. And we did that with an embedded report, right? It wasn't something that was native in a list view or a block, but we could say like, hey, only if the folder is pro bono. But that meant that I could have stuff that was really client-specific that didn't need to go to the volunteer on the case, and I could have things that were much more focused on the case, right? It's a lot of thinking about how do you want to leverage this and how do you want to use it, right? When we've got, when we were sending out packets in the mail for volunteers, that could be $20 for a thick packet of referral materials. And when we started sending those over email, well, email's not as secure as we'd like it to be, or as most of us think it is. And I don't know about you, but most of my office staff don't really care for encrypted emails, and most of my volunteers never did either. So there's also a couple of other Legal Server tools that are available to use. And one that we found that was really useful was mentor attorneys, right? And this is something that Legal Server natively tracks. You can have fields to indicate if someone's a mentor or not. But you also have the ability in Legal Server to do one of the things that we try to Houston Volunteer Lawyers and say, hey, I've got a firm contact, right? This organization has a specific attorney at HVL who's going to be responsible as the point person at the firm, right? So a staff attorney becomes your pro bono liaison to Baker Botts or Fulbright and Jaworski, or, well, Fulbright and Jaworski changed the name. But whatever big firm you want, right? It's not as useful for small firms or solos, but knowing who who is the common contact for all of these things. Another thing that we did at Houston Volunteer Lawyers is we tracked obligations, right? And HVL had a really strong bar association that worked with us that before my time created a policy called the Equal Access to Justice Champions Program that said for every 5 attorneys in your Houston office, champions would take 1 pro bono case. And that's how 670 pro bono cases got placed every year, right? Because Houston has a huge lawyer market, and there were a lot of firms that wanted to participate, and they got free advertising out of this on all of the bar magazines because the bar had a full-page spread about it. And then you got to track which firms met their commitment each year and which firms didn't. And then we even got them to agree to a financial penalty if they didn't make their commitment. So we got a donation out of it, right? I'll be honest, not every firm actually paid their financial penalties, but like it was there, right? It was an incentive to try and get them to take cases. Of course, we weren't the only game in town, and people wanted cases that they took at other legal aid organizations to count towards their equal access numbers. And so we made accommodations so that if you took a case from Kind, or if you took a case from AVDA, or some of the other local community organizations, we could count some of those cases. But this is something that when HVL migrated to Legal Server, we said, we need this feature in Legal Server, right? This is something that's important to us that we need to be able to track. And so Legal Server did custom development and built that feature out. So those numbers are now tracked in Legal Server, and you can and available in reporting, and that report is public on HVL's website every month, going like, how many cases did you commit to this year, and how many cases have you actually taken this year, right? And it's always interesting when you can say like, oh, had this person been a firm all on their own, they would have taken so many cases, right? The other thing that we did is we tracked CLE attendance and said if you came to a CLE, right, that was like 6-hour CLE, full day CLE, something like that, you can do that for free if you take a pro bono case or 2 pro bono cases or volunteer at a clinic, right? And then we can say, if you didn't do it, then like pay us $250 for the CLE and we'll take that as a donation. So that's something that we tracked using pro bono obligations on outreaches, right? Tools that already exist in Legal Server that you can manipulate to identify who's going to these events, who's got these obligations, and then as the cases get placed, you can satisfy all of these obligations and see where they've gone, what they've done. There's also the ability to find the right attorney, right? This is a really long list view. I am sorry it is so wide. I have no control over that. However, if you do complain about it being too wide, there is a dynamic version of it that is narrower that you can customize. I'll say that. If that means nothing to you, then just ignore what I just said. But this is something where if you're tracking data on your volunteers, you can really see some useful elements about which attorney do I reach out to, right? You can see how many past referral attempts have I made to an attorney? What cases do they take? What languages do they speak, right? What's their current contact information? How many other cases of this legal problem code have they taken in the past? Do they have a current case? When was their last current case, right? So maybe you contact the person who took a case last week and say, I've got a second case that's exactly like the first one. Or maybe you contact the person who hasn't taken a case in 5 years going like, hey, I'd love to re-engage you. Can I offer you this new case, right? There's a lot that you can do here to say, where's the right attorney? How can I filter this? Where can I go to get the right information? Again, this relies on data. If you don't have the data in the system, all of these filters are meaningless, right? You can't get what you need. The last thing that I want to mention is the clinics, right? Clinics are best when you're trying to connect attorneys and clients ahead of an actual case, right? You've got 15 attorneys over here and 30 clients showing up, and you want to make sure that you've got something to line them up with in advance, right? And so you have a clinic and you have a clinic event, right? Clinic events are the actual date things that are happening. Clinics are, well, we have a bankruptcy clinic every Tuesday, right? And then Tuesday, today's the 14th, right? Tuesday the 14th is one of those clinic events. So that's a nice way to link all of these things together and be able to track that. Again, it requires data, and again, it requires a little bit of setup, right? You have to have things set up in advance, and you have to have things available to you. Now, I will say, and Sarah's going to talk about this more, that there is some development happening in the next year or two on clinics, and there are 2 different TIG grants working on 2 different aspects of that that's happening, right? Sarah's going to talk in a minute. I've got one more quote to share. I think it's just one more quote. All right, so Charles Babbage is a mathematician. He wrote that errors using inadequate data are much less than those using no data at all. Right? Something's better than nothing, and it's worth going through that. And so when we're talking about data, right, we're really talking about making sure that the information's accurate, that it's detailed enough for you to use, that it's up to date, and that it's comprehensive. And sometimes figuring out what you want to track can take some time, but the sooner you start at that, the more data you'll have to actually analyze and use and figure out what's next. So with that, I'm going to turn this over to Sarah, who's going to talk about...
I think you're turning it over to me.
Oh, I'm going the wrong way.
No problem.
Yeah.
We will. We'll get back to clinics. Okay, so quickly, I'm a very practical, I want to see what it looks like kind of person. So for the people in the room who wanted to see how we're using these tools, many of the tools that Michael just described, I wanted to show you what it looks like from our end in LegalServer, how we actually assign these cases and then provide the documents that people need. So most importantly, first of all, like Michael said, putting in the data is the most important, because if you don't have the data in there, there's no way to track it. There's no way to know who your pro bono partners are, what cases they have assigned to them. I mean, other than keeping some spreadsheets, which I know is very cumbersome. So we start by creating a case profile for all of our pro bono attorneys in LegalServer. That allows you to put in their address, their contact information, some basic information about them. And then this second page is the most important, I think, because it tells you their role within your organization and the type of access they're going to have to LegalServer. So, for example, we have roles for different types of volunteers we have. Pro bono advocate are attorneys, but we also have law students waiting to get their pro bono hours before admission to the bar, non-attorney volunteers like paralegals and interpreters, and some of our reporting requires us to track all those numbers separately. So we try to put in the correct user role so that we can find out easily at the end of a year how many of each of those categories we had that year. The next category down is to find out what their type of access is in your system. We don't want to give unfettered access to a LegalServer to our volunteers, because they might end up looking at other clients' cases. Maybe we're assigning them to a trust and estates matter, but they also represent landlords, and they could go find cases for some of our tenants in the system who might be their adversaries. So we want to make sure that they're only seeing the cases we assign to them, avoid any potential conflicts, and protect the materials that we have in our system. So that's what Michael was talking about with the pro bono restricted access. We've set it up so that our volunteers can only see the cases that they're assigned to. And then we also find it important to put in start date and end date and whether they're current and active in their system, because we want to track, when I'm running reports, I don't want to pull up all the attorneys who are excuse me, deceased, moved out of state, no longer want to take a case. Excuse me. So we put in whether they're active, and we also put in start date and end date, because some of our reporting will ask us how many new attorneys started this year, or how many people stopped volunteering with you this year. So we can now run reports if we put all that information in. We didn't used to put it in, so we're backtracking and trying to run these reports now that we're starting to put it in, and it's been much easier once it's in there. And then lastly, this page also allows you to track a lot of very relevant information that you can run reports on if you put in the data. For example, subject matters. What types of cases can this attorney take? What are they experts in? What languages do they speak? Do they participate in any of your clinics? These are really helpful tools. Again, if you're going to run reports, you'll be able to quickly identify who you want for certain cases. And then lastly, the quick note at the bottom is very helpful to me. I used to keep my notes on each attorney somewhere else and then have to go refer to them. Oh, that's a trust and estates attorney, but they'll only take very easy estate administration cases that are not going to litigation, and I'd have to look in 3 places to find it. It could all be right here. You can go to one place and find all of your information. So we assign, I know someone in the room said they don't assign their cases in LegalServer to their pro bono attorneys. We do that, and I think it makes it much faster and easier for us to get them all of the case information. And when you're on their case profile at the bottom, you can see all of the cases they've been assigned to. So that helps you also see what they've been assigned in the past. Do they have currently open cases? Does it look like they have capacity to take more? And you can filter by dates and subject matters and everything else so that you can find out all the detailed information you want from their profile. And similarly, timekeeping at the bottom, we have our attorneys also put in their time and their notes. They're not all good at it, but I will say they're better at reporting time this way than they are about giving us their time slips at the end of a case. We used to ask them to provide a sheet, sign a sheet at the end saying how many hours they spent. Once they're done with the case, no one wants to look back. They didn't keep track of their hours during the life of the case, so they're not going to try to go back and recreate. But if they do it in real time in LegalServer, we have much better results.
I'll just throw out there, one of the things that when I set this up recently for another client, you've got both the form that lets you add a case note and you've got the form that lets you add a time slip. I really like giving pro bono volunteers the form that lets you add time with your case note at the same time so that they're prompted to do both things at the same time, right? So that you're combining this, making it seem more streamlined for the volunteer, and you're going to get more buy-in from your volunteer if they only have to click on one thing to do both of those.
100%. We do the same thing because it does make it much faster, and it eliminates the step of me emailing them every month, what's happened in your case, what's going on, have you called the client? If they're updating LegalServer in real time, I can just look at the case and find that information like we do with staff attorneys. So I just wanted to quickly show you also what it looks like to assign the case in LegalServer. So this is the assignments tab. If you have LegalServer, you're probably very familiar, but you can assign a pro bono case very similarly to how you would any other case in your organization. And they'll show up on that assignments list. The next thing I want to talk about, and this is going to come up a few times throughout today, is document sharing. I think that's really the meat of it and where most people struggle with how to assign cases. So we have 3 ways that we share client documents with pro bono attorneys, and this is the first one. If they're assigned a case in LegalServer, they can get into the LegalServer Uploads tab and download the documents that are uploaded there. Our LegalServer is integrated with SharePoint, but we don't give our volunteers access to our SharePoint site because we have so much sensitive information agency-wide there. So instead, if they're going to be working on a pro bono case, we put those documents in this tab and they can download them from there. I'll show you the other methods later. I can't see what slide this is. Oh. And this is just the time and funding tab again. So for people who want to put in their time, again, it goes in as a case note with the information. So I'm just going to move on to the clinic module. I know that some of you expressed that you have used this. It seemed like very few people in the room have actually used it. We find it helpful, but it has its limitations, and like a lot of things in LegalServer, you really have to create the reports and make it what you want it to be, so it's only going to work for you if you've kind of put the time into it. But what we could use it for is when we schedule a clinic, we can assign all of the cases in advance through the clinic module, so the clients and their cases are assigned to a particular time slot, the attorneys who are going to be assisting them are assigned to the same time slot, and the case is linked right from the schedule there. So here's just a general clinic page giving you information. Is it virtual? Where is it located? Who are the admins on it? And then here's the schedule, which you can assign directly from a client's case. And this slide shows you, if you go through the client's case, you can actually, from their case, put them onto the clinic schedule. So if you have a paralegal or intake staff talking to a client and they're finishing the intake in this page, right from there, they can assign them to a clinic time slot, which just takes out an extra step of going back and forth in LegalServer pages. And then we've created a report. This took an extra step because we wanted it to look a certain way, but we've created a report so that each clinic, we have all the information on one page that we want. The client, what their case number is in LegalServer, and it could be clicked on right from there. Who the attorney is, what the client's phone number is, so when we have paralegals on a clinic, they don't have to go back into each LegalServer case. The phone number is right there on the same screen. Whether the client needs an interpreter, what language they speak. So we just tried to get all the information that we want in one snapshot in the same screen. And that's just another view. And the last thing I'm going to cover, oh, I actually missed one thing. I don't have a slide of it, but I'll describe it. Sorry. So the last thing is, in the clinic module in LegalServer, you can also attach documents to a clinic. So any attorneys who are going to volunteer for a particular clinic can see the documents that are uploaded to that particular clinic. For that, we have training materials, training videos, all of our pro se forms, all of our manuals, and some case law. Maybe there are common issues that are always coming up. Well, here's basically a pre-filled motion to dismiss that you can plug in for the client. So we try to input all that information so that each clinic, I'm not printing out forms or telling the attorney where to look or emailing the forms again. I can just direct them back to that clinic page, and they should be able to download them all themselves there. And then lastly, we also use, oh, yes. So there's two ways we do that. One is within the case itself. For the individual case assignment we're making, we can upload documents to that LegalServer case. No. So that's what I'm about. Perfect question. Good timing. I'm going to get there now. So the last way we share documents, this is the third way, is through a SharePoint extranet site. And this has been really helpful when we have voluminous documents or very sensitive documents. We have two extranet sites, one of which is resources. It's a little bit less, not secure, but it can be, once you share a link and that link is shareable, anyone with the link can see the resources. So there we just put training videos, materials. You'll see here, I make folders per clinic, so we can just share that folder with any of the attorneys attending that particular clinic, and they'll be able to see our training video, all of our manuals, materials, any volunteer forms we need signed for that clinic. It's all in that folder. So I'll share it with the pro bono coordinator at a firm, and they're able to share it with their staff, and it's one email, it's not 20 emails. Then for more sensitive information pertaining to a particular client, we have a case sharing extranet site. This is password protected for an individual attorney. So they would get their own login to this extranet site and be given access only to their client's folder. And it's more secure than using LegalServer because they're not downloading it to their individual devices. And they're only able to view in the cloud. And you can restrict access so they can't download, they can't edit. They can just view it in the cloud through the extranet site. So that's, I think, the best option when you have voluminous, sensitive client files, usually not for a clinic, but for a full representation matter that you're referring. Any questions before I pass it off to Sarah? Great. Oh, yeah, you know.
Okay, I don't have any real exciting slides, and I apologize. Time got away from me, and life got in the way. Anyways, so Georgia Legal Services, we do not use the clinic module currently. We tried to use it 2 years ago. I like to think I can do tech, but apparently I can't, because every time they would train me on it, I would put clients in and I would mess things up. And finally, Heidi Banky, who trained me, said, you know what, let's try something else, because I wasn't getting it. So we have been organizing our clinics mostly through spreadsheets and SharePoint, which I'm sure a lot of you have done. And we finally developed a system. It took a good year and a half of doing clinics to develop systems, but we finally developed a system using Excel, getting it up on SharePoint so that we could have all of our staff access it. And the way we have been doing it is we have local partners down in these rural areas of Georgia who will send us permission to contact forms. We put those into spreadsheets, and those get put up there. A message goes out to the team. People start picking clients off there, calling and doing the intakes. And so there was a lot of back and forth between, okay, this person's in legal server now, and we had one big spreadsheet that had everybody, with a second page just for who the staff is and who's assigned to intake and who's going to be working this at the clinic and who's going to be doing that. And then a third page, with as we recruited attorneys to volunteer in these areas. Does that sound familiar to some people? Right? So we know there's a better way. We know there's technology. So we do have a TIG. It actually just started, when it started December 1st, I think it just started. But we have a TIG grant to try to figure out a way to get rid of our Excel spreadsheets and put this all in one spot and not be going back and forth between legal server and Excel spreadsheets. For anybody who does clinics, especially bigger clinics, a lot of the work is beforehand. It's all that planning. It's all that going out and like Michael was saying, with the personal contacts, knowing who you need to contact in the local community, how to contact all those clients. And so we are looking to work with Legal Server to develop a workflow plan so that we can, from the start of a clinic, start putting information into Legal Server, being able to assign jobs in Legal Server to staff so we know, this person's going to be doing the intake and this person's going to be doing this, so that we can not have so much back and forth, so we don't have people saying, where did the spreadsheet go again? Or, because we've been doing a lot of disaster work in the last 3 months, oops, I just messed up line 1362, could someone tell me how to fix that? We've been going through a lot of that right now with spreadsheets. So it's a big project. It's going to take us a while, but we're going to be going through it piece by piece and saying, all right, well, let's do working with local partners. How are we working with local partners? We're going to work on one module at a time, roll it out, make sure it works. This is why I'm the attorney on it, because if someone can mess it up, it's going to be me. So I'm the person who's going to click something wrong, which is why the tech people at, well, Legal Server might not be excited, but the tech people at my program are excited because they know I will be the one go, oops, it was me. But we're going to roll out one module at a time, make sure it works, make sure we're at a clinic and that it's working for us before we then add more things on it, so that when we do run into problems or something doesn't seem to be working, at least we can backtrack and go, oh, well, it worked to this point. So now we know it's something moving forward. So we're hoping to set this up so it meets our real needs as we're preparing for these clinics. And actually, I think our first meeting's didn't we say next week?
Something like that.
Yeah, something like that. Like, we're just starting it. This is really fresh, which is why there's no slides. I have nothing to show you yet. But hopefully in a year, we'll be able to go, here's this really great clinic model. We do have an advisory group that is, advising us, watching out, making suggestions and asking questions. And hopefully this will be something when we finally have it in its full form, or even as we get parts working, that'll be something that could be very useful for programs out there who are doing it, like I said, the way we're doing it right now, which is a lot of spreadsheets, a lot of SharePoint, a lot of emails back and forth, Dropbox, and, not Google Docs, because I can't get into Google Docs from my organization email. But that is, I don't know, from the legal service side of our grants, is there anything?
So I will say GLSP is one of the two partners doing TIG grants focused on clinics in the current TIG cycle. And the way that I look at your requests are mostly, this is really expanding pro bono features within the clinics module. The other TIG grant is looking a lot more at the scheduling and internal uses of clinics. So we're looking at the clinics module in a couple different ways over the next year.
It'll be exciting. Stay tuned.
Perfect. So that leads me to how we've worked with Hudson Valley, specifically not just on pro bono clinics, because we have had the opportunity to do that. In fact, I came in with helping out Hudson Valley when it came to establishing those specific user roles within their legal server to really help out and create these strong divides between the types of people that would be accessing legal server, as well as like helping out with setting up those reports so they're easily accessible and they're reporting on these key metrics as well. Now, a common rhetoric that we've talked about throughout this session is making things easy for the pro bono attorney, making sure that the data is there and the resources are there. So one project that we did with Hudson Valley is actually integrating Legal Server with e-immigration Serenade. Now, that platform is a separate case management system that's primarily focused around keeping updated immigration forms for their clients. And how this plays into the potential pro bono opportunity is that the data is smoothly moving from Legal Server into this platform. So when an attorney sits down with a client that needs to fill out immigration paperwork, the data is already there. So one main aspect with Serenade and this integration with Legal Server is making sure that there's a centralized platform for like managing these immigration cases. Now, if you've ever been exposed to the immigration process, things are constantly changing. You need to always keep on top of everything. So this platform kind of does that for you. And the way that we were able to kind of integrate that is smoothly moving data over. And it also increases this client collaboration aspect of things. Now we know that Legal Server has a built-in document uploading process, but so does Serenade. And in fact, Serenade has some ease of access, like document automations within it too. So when you can upload documents, things get automatically populated into some of these immigration forms that are necessary. So I will high level go over kind of what's working on the back end of things, and really all the heavy lifting is done by Legal Server, specifically via like their outgoing API block that they have. So it initially starts with a form or a process that's created within Legal Server. They go in, a Legal Server representative would go in, kind of eye down the fields, make sure all the data that's necessary to be transferred over to Serenade is there and available for them. They just go ahead and click a continue button, and that data is automatically populated into Serenade. Now, the way that Serenade kind of works on the back end is that there are clients, and one client can have multiple cases. So there has to be some type of client verification process within this back-end process of sending data over. And that's what that second chart kind of talks on, is we kind of do a search on if that client already exists within Serenade. And if they do, then we just go ahead and update the client with any new information that might have been captured within Legal Server. Let's say they moved addresses or changed their name or got married or anything like that. We want to make sure that Serenade has the most recent information related to that client, and then we go ahead and add a new case within Serenade that's related to that client. Now, if that client didn't exist and they just had their profile created within Serenade, that's where that second upper route goes, is to where we actually now create that client using Legal Server data, and then we create the case that's also using Legal Server data. And that's where that smooth ease of access of data from Legal Server into Serenade really comes into place. Now, this is just a super high-level view of like what that report looks like. We have my case of Testington, who has immigration forms that needs to be filled out and be sent over. This is really just a high-level view of what this would look like within Legal Server. You go ahead, review those fields there. You can see that there are editing capabilities as well. So if things need to be updated, the Legal Server advocate can go ahead and do that at the same time. The Legal Server user could do that at the same time. And then there's as simple as just a continue button down at the bottom. And when they press that continue button, you can see here that the information is created within Serenade, and all of that necessary and relevant information from Legal Server is actually transferred over to Serenade. And all of those attorneys, both Hudson Valley and pro bono attorneys that have access to the Serenade, they can log in, and that case is there for them to use as well. But yeah, we'll go ahead and go into questions?
So I want to start this by saying that I don't see, last I looked, there's no questions in the app. But one thing to note is that this is only a portion of the pro bono tools that are available to you from Legal Server or SharePoint or other integrations here. So if you have other questions, right, please feel free to catch someone from Legal Server about what can I do with pro bono. Please feel free to stop into Legal Server's office hours. I think it's once a month, maybe it's once a quarter. We do a pro bono tools Tuesday training. That's a whole hour on pro bono tools. I didn't talk about a lot of the common ones, right? There are more, and there are more than you think there are. So feel free to ask questions and reach out and go, how would I do X? And we can talk to you about whether that's possible. Do we already have a tool that we built years ago that no one else is using that we can point you at? So it's out there. So questions? Yeah.
Over what Serenade does. Yeah, sure. Good morning. I'm sorry, I'm a little slow this morning. So can you repeat what the Serenade platform is about? I kind of missed it.
Yeah, so Serenade is a tool that Legal Services of Hudson Valley uses primarily to kind of manage the updated immigration forms for their clients. So that data would already be there to kind of pre-populate these immigration forms that are necessary for their client to be using.
One interesting fact that came out at our year-end meeting with immigration forms is that in 2023, Legal Server ended up updating, I think, 10 or 12 immigration forms over the course of the whole year. And then in 2024, Legal Server had to update over 50 just because of the change in all of the forms from the different organizations at the government level. And we're expecting that in the next year, we'll end up changing a lot more as well. So, yeah. Tom.
So to follow up on Serenade, because we're all now intrigued, where do the documents get stored that are created? Do they come back into Legal Server? Can you get them in the SharePoint directly?
Yes, that's a really good question. As of right now, the documents are being stored primarily within Serenade, but there is that capability of actually using Legal Server's document API to push data back into Legal Server into that relevant case. So these are conversations that we've had with Hudson Valley to see the ease of access of getting data back into Legal Server, because the last thing that we want to do is duplicate efforts, and we don't want them to have to download on Serenade and then upload into Legal Server. So it's definitely on like a roadmap of integrations.
And if you're using the document API, there is a parameter in that if you have the Legal Server SharePoint integration, not only does the file make its way to Legal Server, but instead we don't store it in Legal Server, we store it in the cases SharePoint folder directly as opposed to storing it in Legal Server. But we'll make a case note and tell you that we did that.
So, sticking with the same theme, I'm curious if that's something that can be done with other types of software, like the bankruptcy software, for example. Can we use the same type of API connection to get, the documents that we're loading in, the clients are loading in on their credit scores and things like that? Can that be built in a similar
Yeah,
way?
I'm sure it definitely can. Serenade was mostly used because that's the tool that Hudson Valley used at the time for immigration software. But Legal Server has a plethora of API connections, and it is relatively user-friendly to use as well. So getting data out of Legal Server and back in is super simple. So I would say, from my experience, as long as that third-party software has a way to push data out, Legal Server has a way to catch that data. Not to toot Legal Server's horn,
And-
but
Yeah, and if you have a particular bankruptcy software in mind, feel free to stop into the integration office hours, and I can help brainstorm with you what that would look like. That's every Tuesday at 4 p.m. Eastern. Yeah, Amy, hold on. There's a mic coming for you. But we're recorded,
I
so
probably really don't need a mic. But my question is, I know that there are client folders that are in SharePoint that relate to each client and have their documents. Does the same,
case folders.
yeah, What did
No,
I say?
Client folders.
Case folders. Yeah, that's what I meant. Are the same for things like clinics? Do they have, no, so nothing else gets in SharePoint other than the case folders?
Right. And if you're this is one of those limitations of the legal server SharePoint integration, is that it's limited to just matters. We've had quotes from organizations who wanted to expand it to outreaches or elsewhere. That hasn't gone anywhere. But if you are using, legal server allows documents on a lot of different modules. I don't think clinics is one of them now. It wouldn't be a huge lift to add it from how I see us structure the database. But if you're using the Office for the web integration, that works on any module in legal server. So to be able to edit those documents that are stored on outreaches or grants or somewhere else, you can still do that. Other questions? Yeah.
This is a fairly basic question, but I'm curious, this is a fairly basic question, but I'm curious if you can talk about potential solutions as you're entering pro bono user data in legal server. That's something that takes a lot of time for our staff to do. We currently have a Microsoft form where people sign up and we put it in the same order, but we have someone manually entering that. Are there systems or software that will help populate that information in legal server?
Yeah, so there's two things. One is we have a registrations module, which would allow volunteers to register directly into legal server. That then creates a contact record that you can review and either merge or link with or create a user account for them. So that's a additional module. It looks like our online intake forms, and it just works pretty nicely. We recently added the ability to upload documents at the same time. We had a group that wanted people to register and then also upload their resume or something like that, or cover letter, I don't know. The other thing is, Devin's talked about our plethora of APIs. All of our user APIs and organization APIs are free, right? We restrict some of the case APIs so that you can't create cases unless you're paying for the premium APIs. But you can create users, and you can create organizations, and you can create organization affiliations, all using free APIs. And we've got a couple groups that tried working with Salesforce. We've got one group that's actively working with Salesforce to synchronize their legal server volunteer user data with Salesforce in both directions. We've got groups that are, with a Microsoft form, you could easily collect the information and use Power Automate to make an API call to check to see, does this user already exist? Does this bar number already exist? And if not, then create the user as a pro bono restricted access user or something else like that with a tag of needs review or something. So all of that could happen. I want to say 2-3 years ago, we were doing a lot of integration community calls, and we had an integration community call about the Salesforce integration. And with that, we outlined all of the different API calls that you would need to make for that. And so that's on our help site somewhere, I think under the third-party integrations page. Robin. Well, hold on. Mike is coming. Yeah.
Hello. Is this even working? Okay.
Yeah.
Either Michael from you or crowdsourcing from the audience, I would love some best practice tips for how folks are tracking background and conflicts checks for their PBAs, PBIs. I have 15 different offices. They are doing it 15 different ways, some in legal server, some not in legal server. It's a data nightmare. How are folks tracking, or are they using legal server to track conflicts and background checks and where those things are?
Background checks of the volunteers and conflict checks of the volunteer with the organization or with the client?
Let's say the latter.
Okay.
But let's, background checks.
Background checks. So I will say in Legal Server, right, if you're using the pro bono restricted access role and allowing volunteers to log in, you can choose whether a volunteer has the ability to assign themselves to cases or not. And you can make that choice on a individual user by user basis. So you can say, this one we haven't background checked. They can say that they're interested in something, but we're not going to give them a case. Other than that, right, you can use a custom field to say we've background checked them, they're good.
And we just manually assign the cases. Our staff does that. So we have a chance to vet the volunteers, speak to them, check their bar registration, do our own background checks, and then we assign them. We don't allow our volunteers to make a choice about which cases they're assigned to.
Yeah, we go on the State Bar website, and we check out their disciplinary record, and because our executive office is in the State Bar building, it's a lot easier for us to take a walk downstairs if we have to and go, hey, what do you know about this person?
I got very upset when the Texas Bar changed their website so that that you couldn't just use a URL parameter to search by a bar number, and that you had to fill out a field instead. And it meant that I couldn't just provide a hyperlink, click here to see if they're the bar status of this person. I got the message that we have to wrap up. Thank you all so much for being here. We're going to be around today for questions and everything else like that. Feel free to catch us. And thank you all for being here and participating.
Thank you.